if tradwifery has been defined by the people who are able to do it full time online, one, it being a job, but like two, who is like out there tradwifing, and what does that look like?
Yeah, like, is there real life tradwifing versus like image-based job tradwifing, right? Because a colleague of mine was talking about, like, I do all these things. Like, I have a farm, I make my bread, I make my soap. I also like vaccinate my cows and like all of these other pieces, you know? So she was like, I identify and I don't. And it's like, it's like another version of oversimplifying.
Welcome back to Making It Awkward. I'm Jessica Wilson, clinical dietitian and author of It's Always Been Ours. You can find me on Instagram at jessicawilson.msrd. You can email the pod at makingitawkwardpod@gmail.com. This is an independent podcast brought to you by the people of the Patreon community and folks who love a book club. Today welcomes Meghan Cichy, Leslie Voorhies Means, Selena Salfen, and Alison back to the show to chat about the fiction book Yesteryear. If you want to watch the five of us on screen, you can head over to the Making It Awkward YouTube channel. To sustain these conversations, you can join the Patreon for as little as $3 a month, and my dad welcomes new Patreon members to the community. You can also rate the pod and review it on Apple Podcasts. You can send an episode to a friend and share the social media posts about the episode so that others can find it. You can find Awkward merch on my website. Today is part one of a book club recording about Yesteryear by Carol Claire Burke. This episode is the cut before we get to the spoilers of the group. Each of us shares who, if any, of the characters we connect with. We also discuss tradwives and whether we can define them, the idea of family values, and the valuing of what is typically thought of as women's work. The four guests also touch on motherhood. We get into what a possible difference in progressive versus conservative values might be, though the topic isn't fully resolved. Part two will come next week with the spoilers of the book and our analysis of the protagonist, Natalie. The following is the description of the book from Penguin Random House. Natalie lives a traditional lifestyle. Her charming farmhouse is rustic. Her husband is a handsome cowboy. Her 6 children, each more delightful than the last. So what if there are nannies and producers behind the scenes? Her kitchen hiding industrial-grade fridges and ovens. Her husband, the heir to a political dynasty. What Natalie's followers, all 8 million of them, don't know won't hurt them. And the angry women, the privileged Ivy League coastal elite haters who call her an anti-feminist iconoclast, they're just sick with jealousy because Natalie isn't simply living the good life. She's living the ideal and just so happens to be building an empire. Until one morning, she wakes up in a life that isn't hers. Her home, her husband, her children, they're all familiar, but something's off. Her kitchen is warmed by a sputtering fire rather than electricity. Her children are dirty and strange, and her soft-handed husband is suddenly a competent farmer. Just yesterday, Natalie was curating photos of homemade jam for her Instagram, and now she's expected to haul firewood and hand-wash clothes until her fingers bleed. Has she become the unwitting star of a ruthless reality show? Could it really be time travel? Is she being tested by God? By Satan? When Natalie suffers a brutal injury in the woods, she realizes 2 things. This is not her beautiful life, and she must escape by any means possible. A gripping, electrifying novel that is as darkly funny as it is frightening. Yesteryear is a gimlet-eyed look at tradition, fame, faith, and the grand performance of womanhood. And with that, let's get into part 1 of this conversation. Meghan, Selena, Alison, and Leslie, welcome back to the show. Meghan, do you want to say something so folks can recognize your voice?
Hello, everyone. This is Meghan Cichy, and I'm happy to be back.
Awesome. Selena?
Hi, Selena Salfen. I am also excited to be here.
Alison
Pill, always ready for a book club.
And then Leslie.
Hi, I'm Leslie Voorhies Means. Excited to get into it.
Alrighty. We will get into Yesteryear. What experiences are we bringing to the book that perhaps informed our reading? It could have been religion, motherhood, family history, money, and definitely ideas about motherhood and being a wife would be great to hear more about. Leslie, would you like to start?
Sure. So I'm bringing, I guess I'm a self-identified tradwife. I removed myself from working and am a stay-at-home mom, taking care of my kids right now. So I'm also Harvard educated like Natalie, hopefully not as much of a sociopath as her, which we can talk about later. I grew up religious, Christian. Her religion is not very clearly defined, but I grew up Christian and would still definitely call myself spiritual. I did not grow up privileged, but I am privileged now. So we have enough money where I don't need to work, and we can pay for help and the lifestyle that we want. So, and then I'm also a mom. I have 2 kids. I think I said that. So,
Can you say more about tradwife other than staying home?
I mean, I say it tongue in cheek, but because I think it's been a role that has been like assigned to conservative women too. So it's like my way of saying I'm a Republican and I'm a stay-at-home mom, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah.
You said you only had 2 children though, so you may not qualify. I'm just letting.
I know that's not, yeah. I think if I were a real tradwife, I would have more like at least 4 kids
Yeah.
to really
That's
qualify.
fair.
You got to start somewhere though, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Fair. There's still time. Selena, what about you?
Well, I grew up 0% religious, and I'm still probably 0% religious, but I grew up in southern Missouri, so around a lot of evangelical Christians. So I feel like the setting of this book feels really familiar, the ruralness of it, and was just kind of identifying with, a lot of my friends were evangelical Christians, and the pressure they put on themselves is very real. And, I would be kind of sad for them if somebody got pregnant or got someone pregnant, and then, they're kind of locked into that life. But I think I grew up around them before there was such a political divide. And so we were just all friends. So I don't know. That was interesting. But also, I live kind of the progressive working class version of this homesteading fantasy. So we had a huge organic garden, goats. I was homeschooled until 5th grade, which I have very complex feelings about, and am now being forced to homeschool my only child. So yeah, I just have no illusions about idealizing the rural life or homeschooling or any of that. So this was pretty interesting to watch their version of it, having actually experienced some of it.
And then Megan?
Yeah, I was born and raised in the suburbs outside of Seattle. Not much rural experience at all. I was raised Catholic, went to private Catholic school until 8th grade. Then I transitioned over to public high school. I do not identify as religious. Our family is exposed to different religious traditions, but we aren't practicing in any way, shape, or form. We are pretty financially stable. We have access to all of the things we need in really consistent ways. And I am married. I do have 2 children, a 6 and a 10-year-old. And I think that covers most of those pieces. My disclosure.
Nice. Alison, what about you?
Oh, hi, everybody. I dropped off because of rural internet.
Perfect.
Yeah, I live in the woods, and I've lived in the woods for about 5 years full time. I am divorced. I have 1 9-year-old kiddo. And so I think there's a lot of overlap in terms of, sort of back to the land curious in my life. And also, reckoning with what it means that I am divorced, went through that, kid growing up in 2 households. I am also a churchgoer. My Christianity is quite different from that depicted by our lovely protagonist. But I also appreciate, some of the call to making sense of the world through simplifying. Also famously a Luddite. And so, grateful that my internet works at all.
I grew up in the suburbs. My parents divorced early. I primarily lived with my mom, who is the opposite of a tradwife. We very much television, very easy meals, no long cooking. My dad always had a garden, and I moved to Portland and then Eugene, Oregon. And Eugene, I did an AmeriCorps management position on a 2-acre farm for years. And I was like, this is the way I want to live my life. I want to grow all of my vegetables. This is amazing. It was also exhausting, but I didn't care because I was so committed. And then I met my current spouse, Alicia, and then visited her family on a farm. And I was like, oh, this is hard. This is hard work. You all are up early and out late milking these goats and doing all of these dirty, muddy things, which in theory are fine, but then have to like go to school and do jobs and other things because this is not like financially sustaining. So it definitely took the rose-colored glasses off of farming for me. I also had 6 chickens in my backyard until a raccoon swiped at one of them. And I realized I am not a chicken person because Alicia said first thing, I don't know what to do. It's 5 a.m. and we don't have a gun. And I was like, all right, like, you are from a farm. I am not. We're getting rid of these chickens. Not doing it. I am also not a religious person. I'm not a mother. And being a wife is an identity or a, what's the word? Like label that I've never really resonated with just because of all the assumptions that come along with being a wife. So will call myself and my spouse a spouse instead. I, yes, have not been religious, but my mother-in-law has gone deeper and deeper into Christianity that has come out looking like Judaism as she gets more and more into that and communicating via Hebrew and other characters in the text too. So that's been a journey that I've gotten to witness. With those, and having spoken a bit about my mother-in-law, do you all see yourselves in any of the characters and your relatability to them? I will start. Alison, do you want to start?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, I think I understand the most, and it's why I struggled to get through the first bit of the book, because I think I understand subsumed rage and find it very difficult to sort of sit with it, of just the same kind of rage that applies to so many populations, but there is a sort of dealing with mansplaining or being thought of as stupid when you know you're not. All of that kind of like, I'm going to scream. And there is this sort of guttural sense and discomfort around that of I'm not allowed to actually scream at these people, but in my head, I am just primal screaming. And it's a very uncomfortable feeling because anger in many people, but anger in women is just, we don't like it. I don't even like it, and now I was having to sit with the discomfort of spending time in someone's consciousness that is so rageful all the time.
That would be Natalie.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Sorry, sure. Natalie. I'm going to forget everybody's names throughout. I don't pay attention to names.
Oh, okay. It's another disclosure. No,
yeah. Yeah. I'll pull up the list of names.
It's all good. Selena, what about you?
Well, I guess I found it very hard to identify with Natalie in any way, except that I enjoyed her self-censoring, because I think we all do that to some extent. So it was nice, the things we want to say and the things she wouldn't let herself say. I just wanted her to let some of those out. But I did feel really sad for her when she went to Harvard. And, I think I identify with not fitting into that elite college environment. I spent 1 year at Washington University and was like, oh, I don't belong here. Worst car on the lot. So, yeah, I felt like I just wanted people to give her a chance. Like she was different. And yeah, I was sad for her when they kind of rejected her for just being a little weird. But my sadness for her quickly went away as soon as she got a little more awful. But I was kind of like, what would the version of the story have been like if she had been, corrupted by the liberal college environment and, become a riot girl or something? Like, what if she was Kathleen Hanna? And I don't know. That would be an interesting story too.
Yeah. Megan, what about you?
Yeah, I feel like I was trying to think of other characters that I might be able to identify with, because I know we're talking a lot about Natalie right now, but I think that it was challenging for me to identify with Natalie, except like when she started talking about when Clementine was born, her first baby, and how she like was like, this is not okay. Like, this was a mistake. This child is, I don't know if these are spoilers. This child is evil. Maybe we cut that part out. I don't know. But I think that I really identified with not having that automatic like infatuation with my kids when they were born. You know, like you're supposed to be like, oh, I love you. And I love my kids and I loved my kids and I felt very protective, but I didn't feel like this like instant, like deep connection with them. You know, I was still meeting them for the first time in a new way. And so I think that was, I'm kind of glad that content was in there, because I think in motherhood, we talk a lot about things being natural and just like, you just know, or you just do, or you just feel. And I think for so many people, that's not the case. But then it sort of drives a lot of like shame or guilt, or like, I'm doing it wrong, or what's wrong with me, or what's wrong with us, or what have you, that I think only makes like postpartum stuff more complex or complicated. So I think that was one thing that stood out to me about Natalie, that I could identify with not having that automatic connection. And yeah, I think I'll leave it there.
Okay. Leslie, what about you?
Yeah, I think I would say I identify with Natalie in that like we both chose the tradwife path, but like it doesn't seem like she really chose it, or she feels very trapped. But in the front half of the book, I felt like I related with at least that part of it, valuing family, feeling like motherhood is a really important job worth investing in, making a choice to stay at home. I also think, well, I guess I also identify or relate to her in that she kind of got inherited into a political family. Mm-hmm. So, which I also have been inherited into more politics than I was ever interested in, and feeling like a public presence, I guess, like having to think about how I come across online. I'm not an influencer, but a lot of people, not a lot, some people follow me. A lot of people follow Jessica and you guys, but yeah, feeling like I need to be a different version of myself online, given my husband and sister-in-law's involvement in politics. So, and then I guess a smaller point, but there's this idea that like she didn't want to show the help that she has. Natalie's like condemned for having nannies that she doesn't show. But I think there's this like hidden trap, because when women do show their help, they get attacked for being privileged, or I guess in my personal experience, accused of cultural appropriation for having a confinement nanny. Like there's this interesting pull or trap, I would say, with women, moms, especially, for being criticized for making it look easy, but then also showing what it actually takes to be a mom, which is a ton of work. I don't think that's a tradwife problem specifically. I think that's a challenge for all moms, but I definitely like related that with how Natalie like hid certain things. It's like, oh yeah, because you're kind of punished for either.
Follow-up question, and folks, of course, I mean, feel free to jump in. Leslie, I was wondering, because before DC, you were very like business oriented. And so I think, or I was curious about definitely chosen to be at home now. Do you feel like the choice, you got to make that choice, or the choice was made for you, or like, how are you thinking about that point?
No, I definitely feel like I got to make that choice. Like I didn't feel cornered into it. I feel cornered into like talking about politics. I'd rather like not talk about that, but, sure. Or being involved in politics. But, no, the decision to like remove myself from the workforce for this chapter was definitely my own.
I have a tradwife question, because I don't have TikTok. I have Instagram, but I've not been like looped into I don't really have a lot of tradwife experience. And so my tradwife experience is coming from like this conversation, the book, and that's pretty much it. But it seems to me, and then based on what you've said, Leslie, like Natalie wasn't tradwifing. Like she was creating the perception that she was a tradwife in the sense that she was working, like her job was to like serve her husband and have her kids and like manage the home and like bake all the bread and all of those things. But she wasn't doing any of those things. She was sort of the boss of the relationship. She was not great at making bread, like all of these different things. So it was like she was performing tradwife, but she wasn't actually tradwife. And it feels like so often we have like these labels that include a lot of different things that we then put on ourselves. But in reality, like those things aren't actually really happening, or like at least not the entirety of it, or as like completely. And so it's like, tradwife is like this ideal that she was, I think, aligned with some of her maybe religious or political beliefs or moral or ethical beliefs. But she also, as like you were saying, Leslie, like found that it's like more complicated to do all of those things and be that person and to do that in a sustainable way that didn't cause some degree of harm somewhere or the other. And so like the reality is all of us need help, but like the help she couldn't show because that would tarnish the image of what a tradwife is supposed to be. And so it's like all these like maybe unrealistic expectations that we're supposed to live up to while we can't. And then we kind of see how that leads to this sort of breakdown in like many senses of the word for Natalie throughout the course of the book. But I think we see that also in like other ways around other topics and other issues.
I think for me, my introduction to tradwifery was that famous Guardian article about the ballerina mom on the farm, on the ranch, like Ballerina Ranch or whatever, because there are definitely echoes of that in Yesteryear. And that article was fascinating, and also it's interesting to read it with sort of this, it's hard to figure out what kind of feminist lens to put on things, because it is frowned on for someone to make the choice to step back from a profession in order to raise children. You know, the article goes to great lengths to say, like, she was in the middle of her ballet career. And specifically ballet, you're like, you have like 5 years, you know? And just sort of, you know, it's very much the like, made it sound as though her husband had forced the issue, and that they could not make the farm work, and that she was still, you know, the only real earner in the family, which is also the case of, you know, professionally performing tradwife is still a job. You know, it's still a defiance of the expectation. You know, quiet tradwifing doesn't make any money. You know, it has to be really loud tradwifery for it to work. But it is this constant tension between what is of value in this world. And it goes to the image question, which is images are far more valuable across the board than anything we do quietly.
Meghan, when you were talking, it did make me think of like the bossification of tradwife, or how it does become that job. Like it may seem like you're choosing to work from home, but you're working harder. I can't even begin to discuss how much time and energy like producing content online is. So yes, with that help. And so then you're right, Meghan, like if tradwifery has been defined by the people who are able to do it full time online, one, it being a job, but like two, whom is like out there tradwifing, and what does that look like? I don't know.
Yeah, like is there real life tradwifing versus like image based job tradwifing, right? Because a colleague of mine was talking about like I do all these things, like I have a farm, I make my bread, I make my soap. I also like vaccinate my cows and like all of these other pieces, so she was like, I identify and I don't. And it's like, it's like another version of oversimplifying, I think, just the complexity of people and experiences and values and those sorts of things that I think isn't ultimately very helpful. But like, we like to organize, like we like to put things in boxes to make it clearer and understandable. But I think it also creates like these separations or divisions. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Alison, we were talking about who, if anyone, we identify with in the book, and you mentioned the rage for sure. Is there any? I can name them for you as somebody who struggles with names. We have Natalie, Caleb, Doug, Amelia. Actually, this is not going to be helpful because you're not going to know. Natalie's mom, Natalie's sister, her kids, the producer, Rena, the roommate.
I mean, I think the sister and her anger is also incredibly present. And then in terms of subsumed rage, like Caleb's mom, subsumes it in a different way with substances, but it's still like a complete, need to emotionally disconnect from the world. So it feels like everybody in their own ways is completely disconnected from the actual experience of their lives. And I think that's because rage is uncomfortable.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, and it's making me think about it, about the filter and the filtered rage. And I was like, I have no filter. Like I didn't identify with anyone, which was really surprising, which is how I think I didn't end up liking the book as much. Cause usually I'm like pulled in by someone or able to like share an experience with somebody. And so I'm just like either rooting for them or like really experiencing empathy for them. But instead I was just sympathetic for folks. And it was also hard. Both Clementine and Mary like reminded me of my spouse and what she was experiencing as the oldest of 6. So that was difficult in a different type of way. But yeah, I was surprised. I kept waiting to identify with somebody, and like maybe even the producer. I was like, I'm going to like be the person who goes in, and I was like, that's not how I would do it at all. So it's interesting. Do folks have follow-up questions of each other or things that you want to say here?
Selena, I saw you put your hand up. I know there's something cooking in there.
Yeah, let's see if I can remember what I was going to say. I think I'm very interested in the definition of tradwife, because I think there are times that I long to be a tradwife in a non-political way. Like sometimes I would love to stay home with my child and give her, everything that she needs. But I'm working full time and I'm taking care of my community and I'm doing all these different things. But I do think that's something where I wish progressive and liberal could come together, and that women have been tasked with way too much. And we need to support each other in that and push back against that, because I do hear it from both sides. It's just the outcome is very different. Like the outcome is, well, you need to stay home, or the outcome is don't hold child rearing sacred at all, outsource it, things like that, which I also don't agree with. So it's an interesting place where we could come together a little more.
What do you mean come together? I'm a bit lost. This might be part of the like motherhood and things that I would inherently understand about where we're not together and what we need to come together about.
Might have to think that one through. But I remember before having a kid, how I was like, career is what I'm going to do. And, I was in maybe like Shannon in the photography and video field before I came into public health, even though I do not identify with her at all. And yeah, it's like in order to succeed in a field like that, you have to work nonstop all the time. So like, okay, I'm going to be in Los Angeles, or I'm going to be in New York or Chicago, and I'm not going to be able to stay home. I'm going to be gone for months at a time. And then when I decided to have a kid at 37, 38, all of that changed for me. And I was very softened by motherhood. I was like, oh, this is what it's all about. Like, I love this. It's very, 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 very hard. But then being expected to go into the office and things like that. I mean, this sounds bad because COVID was very bad, but thank goodness for some of the changes that it made to like the work-life balance, because now I only have to go in 2 days a week. So not sure exactly where I'm going with that, except that, yeah, we just need a little more support for women. And I think that's something that's being expressed on both sides.
Jessica knows this, but like, I love finding common ground. And yeah, I want to like underscore that. Like, that is that I feel like moms everywhere would say there's too much on our plate. A lot is expected. I also feel like motherhood softened me. And I think moms have a really hard time in this country. Like, postpartum care is abysmal. Yeah, this expectation that you have to make a choice between career and being a good mom. I think that's hard. You can adopt the tradwife label too if you want to. I don't think right now. I think the definitions, we were talking about definitions. I think the definitions are important too. And I think that it has largely been assigned to conservative women, but I don't think there's any reason why only conservative women can decide to opt out of a career or working and stay at home and be with their kids. So
I also think this goes into like the motherhood versus parenthood thing, because the book also deals with the sort of immovable nature of so much of societal gender roles that Caleb is not allowed to be soft. Caleb is not allowed to not have ambition that is somewhat like conquering. You know, when it becomes obvious through the book that it would be far easier for her to be out in the workforce, you know, becoming the CFO somewhere of some company, and for him to hang out with kids, which is his dream. And there is also, you know, I see it a lot in same-sex parenting couples, that the redefining that has to happen when there is not an obvious societal path for each of whose career sacrifice is going to be made for the household. While at the same time, in a lot of my friends' marriages, heterosexual, like the female is making more money and is also still the primary parent. And those are the pieces that never quite stick together. There are these visions of the way to carve out more equal space for both people's interests and passions and parenthood. And we are just not equipped, it seems like, to do so as a society, to allow those different paths to occur to people naturally.
I have said to many folks that the happiest parents I know are same-sex parents. Like, they just seem to be having the best time, like doing whichever roles they want and whatever they really want to be doing as parents, and like don't seem stressed about the things that I hear amongst heterosexual couples. But they seem to be just having the best time, rarely complaining. So yeah, I definitely see that, Alison, without the prescribed gender roles. Do folks want to say other things about motherhood here? And the question we had was, what was Natalie's relationship to being a mother and being part of a family unit? And Selena, you've already brought up the progressive versus conservative or both in the book. And sorry, I just asked a question and then I'm going to go back. I was hearing that the stay-at-home language and acceptance was more conservative, and then like the grind was more progressive. But like many, I don't know, I feel like both of those I have seen in both progressives and conservatives I know. I mean, Leslie, you were in a grind multiple points in your life, so I don't know if I've ever associated one with being progressive versus one being conservative. So I thought that was interesting that it was brought up.
I think probably that's my bias, is like a big reason why I would identify as conservative is like those family values.
Oh.
And I think that's like, yeah, like a more important aspect of like, yeah, conservatism is like traditional family, like valuing traditional families. I feel like it's more accepted that I'm like, this path that I'm on is more accepted than judged, I guess. Yeah.
Conservative and family, like you mentioned the acceptance portion, but I'm super interested in the idea that conservatives perhaps are more supportive of traditional or value traditional families more. Do folks and or Leslie have thoughts on that? Leslie, you can go first if you want to.
I mean, this has, it's separate than like a pro-life or pro-choice conversation, because I think Republicans also undervalue motherhood by being so pro-life. I am pro-choice, and I don't relate to, I guess I can relate to people who are pro-life because I'm a mother and understand how valuable motherhood is, but it's also what makes it like motherhood is so difficult, and it falls on the mom, which is why women should be able to make that choice to opt in to motherhood. So it's separate from that. But yeah, I guess I just see, it's probably because I'm around conservative women now more, but I just see more conservative women as stay-at-home moms rather than working moms.
I think there's like, I don't know in my mind that it falls into one category or another, because I feel like it's not really the conservative versus progressive or what have you that I think is the line, because like we've said, there are families across that spectrum that may do one versus the other. But I wonder if there is a division, is that more reflective of resources and sort of like access to like having a single earner household, or if you have a dual income household, how does that impact ability to access other types of services? Because a dual income isn't always enough income. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. But sometimes if you then need childcare for a dual income household, and childcare costs more than, you know, that lower earner might be able to make with their second income, the math doesn't math out. And so sometimes it becomes a more like realistic financial decision for one person to work and one person to, you know, manage the family or the household or the kids.
I think that's a really good point. And I also think that the like financially shouldn't create these like, oh, it's conservative versus progressive. I think it depends a lot more on your financial situation than maybe your like quote unquote values, because women and people can feel trapped like regardless of political affiliation. I think where I was coming from is my perception is there is this like feminist judgment of stay-at-home moms, which feels more progressive. And I feel like I need to defend the role of like how valuable this role is, because I think the book itself is like, seems like it's like critiquing tradwife culture, which like that feels deeply anti-feminist to me. Feminism is supposed to be about expanding women's choices. And so like how wonderful that I'll take myself as an example, how wonderful that I can make the decision to do whatever I want with my life. Like that feels deeply feminist to have a choice and like be able to execute on exactly my vision for my life. But this is, you know, I might be like extrapolating, feeling judged just based on like how much conflict there is with and divisive politics are right now. It might not actually be, you tell me, like, do you guys judge me for being a stay-at-home mom? Probably not. I don't know. Like, that.
No, Leslie, I'm curious. Like, okay, back when you were, sorry, again, creepily much about your life, sorry, and involved in Apple and, you know, other high profile jobs, did you ever have any judgment of stay-at-home moms? Was that something that you felt you had to push away in order to be successful?
No, I don't. I think I've always wanted kids. So I don't think I was judgmental. It was more like, well, why would you want to not work? Because working's fun and fulfilling and awesome. And how would you be fulfilled outside of the workforce? Until I had kids. And then, becoming a mom does change, I would say, most women. And I feel deeply fulfilled at home.
Okay. So we may have a similar journey in that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious about like us naming traditional family values, because when I think of that on like a Republican side, I think of like absolutely no divorce. I think of traditional gender norms, no room for, you know, a woman is a woman and a man is a man. And I think of the misogyny that very much scares me because, I didn't mention that I'm also married and to a wonderful man who has been on this podcast. And we share things very equally. And I would be afraid of a traditional value, meaning that I don't get to make as many decisions as I make. So I'm curious what you think of that.
Yeah, I think there's this idea of subservience that is assumed with traditional values. And it's, again, speaking from just our family, that's not the case. I think there are definitely more defined and traditional gender roles. My husband works and earns money, and I am home and manage and run the household. I also think a lot about food and all of the logistics of everything involving kids. There's this great book called Fair Play, if you guys, just a little bit of a tangent, that it's a woman. There's a lot of data on the silent tasks that fall on moms. And it's overwhelmingly things just end up, moms take the lead on executing with kids and household things. Anyway, I would recommend that because it spells out exactly what all these tasks are with running a household. But back to the subservient thing, I don't feel subservient to my husband. I feel we're in more traditional roles right now, but that also felt off to me about Natalie, that she's this idea that she's this little wallflower in the background. And clearly Caleb is more of a nurturing traditional mom type of role too. So I think it's being self-aware of who you are as a person too, not just your gender.
Alison, do you have something to add to any of that?
I think, sorry, I'm lost in so many different tangents because there's so much here. And I forgot what I was originally going to pose as a question. Because now I'm thinking of just the sort of economics of households. There's so much to say about them. I know people who stay at home because, it's also the undervaluing of, what is women's work, of a teacher salary, a part-time teacher salary, a social worker, public services therapist or guidance counselor, all of these jobs that would not make enough. And I know from experience from my friend group, do not make enough to warrant childcare. And so there is more of a push for women to stay at home still and to be backed into what, yes, is officially a choice in that, but it's also the expectation that women want to be around their kids, which I think is overall incredibly true. I can't get enough of my kid. And I have decidedly stepped back from many career opportunities because I wanted to be closer to home and because I value her life and lifestyle and friend group. And I like my life much more outside of work than I used to in my 20s. And I do find that incredibly valuable. At the same time, it really stinks when I look at some of my friends who would be brilliant outside the home, who have been brilliant outside the home and will be again when their kids are older potentially. But it stinks to have it fall on, and it does come down to the economics of whose work is actually valued monetarily, which is the only thing that really matters right now.
I mean, it's just making me think, Alison, in those circumstances, it's not a choice, right? So it's capitalism that is driving this requirement to be at home from a financial perspective. And that's separate from a desire or a value of family and that sort of opportunity to connect and support and how valuable and imperative it is to have that household management working for the betterment of everyone's life. But we're talking about in some circumstances it is a choice and in others it's not. And then there certainly is, I think, automatic this risk of judgment for the situation. And nobody really knows anyone's full circumstances. But I think oftentimes we think we're talking about the same thing when in fact we're talking about different things, whether we're looking at this from a feminist perspective, having the choice is what matters, but that choice is not always actually accessible in certain circumstances.
Would you guys agree though that the stigma goes in one direction though? Like no one's writing books about this like quiet desperation of a woman, in a corporate job who secretly wants to be at home and she can't say that out loud. I feel like it's like the judgment goes on like, here's this mom in this like subservient role and it's lost opportunity or lost potential. Back to like Ballerina Farm, she could have like been a professional ballerina and instead she's a stay-at-home mom. Whereas like we should be valuing what stay-at-home moms do. I don't know.
I think it's all of it, but I think what we're hitting on is like there's these pressures that are even external to any of the conversation that we're really having that are creating the circumstances in which we are forced to make a decision. We may have more options or less options depending on circumstances. But the judgment piece, it's getting us nowhere. And it's like creating this, I think, maybe blame game that again, like doesn't really get us anywhere.
So Leslie, your point is taken. I don't think the book you described, though I'm sure would be a really fascinating book that I think would incite as many discussions, and be a bestseller, honestly, for the same reasons that this one is. And I find it really interesting because I found it to be a much closer read to like an Otessa Moshfegh book, like Eileen, there are these writers who write sort of Patricia Highsmith kind of writers that bring these sort of horrible women to life. And she's not horrible because she's conservative. She's horrible because she's horrible, and it has nothing to do, you see the wonderful grace given to her mom and to her sister who are both, have been traditional moms. And it is not that the problem is trying to fit ourselves into boxes in which we don't fit. And Natalie strikes me as someone who has never fit in any place in the world. So I think it speaks to a sort of feminine experience in that way of nothing's actually built for us, but there is a longstanding tradition of motherhood, hearth, and home that at least can feel comfortable and make sense, and also can be a real driving force in our lives, which I, again, count myself like mom is my first title. It changed my life for the better. But it is also this, like, it is a hampering of discussions I didn't find her vilified because of the traditional elements of her outlook. I wasn't originally interested in reading the book because I wasn't interested in reading about, like, I didn't like that Guardian article. It felt like it took away a lot of her, like, what might have been exactly the choices she wanted to make. As you say, like, it felt very frowned upon to, sort of put a brush of judgment on somebody else's life choices that might make perfect sense. I mean, there's many people who would like to live on a farm and be a mom and be at home and make a living. And so I think it's like this, I didn't like that either. And I find that judgment to be really harmful. So we can agree decidedly on that. But I also
that's also the reason why it's so popular. And that Guardian article was so popular. And this book is so talked about. Like, I don't think it could, like, the flip side of this story about this fascinating, terrible woman in the workforce that wants to stay at home with their kids, like, would not be as popular because it's not as judged, I guess.
I am unfortunately going to move us to post spoilers. That was an abrupt ending to the conversation. We were on a roll and kept going, and I needed to come back with the closing line. Next week, we'll have spoilers of the book and our thoughts on the plot line and story. We hope you'll tune in for that. This has been Making It Awkward, and I'm your host, Jessica Wilson, clinical dietitian and author of It's Always Been Ours. You can find me on Instagram at jessicawilson.msrd. You can email the pod at makingitawkwardpod@gmail.com. You can watch the show on YouTube. And to sustain these conversations, you can join the Patreon for as little as $3 a month. My dad will welcome you to the community. This episode has been edited by Jen Jacobs, who is probably as good at making homemade bread as Natalie. It's supported by the legacy of Sacramento Outboard Services.